There's a question many parents ask me when they visit the temple. Teacher, they say, the older my child gets, the more distant they become. They don't listen like before. They're no longer close to me. What did I do wrong? Usually, I stay quiet for a moment before answering. Not because I don't have anything to say, but because sometimes the most important thing isn't an answer. It's a pause, a moment of stillness, so a parent can turn inward and see themselves more clearly. We live in a society that praises fixing. We fix our homes. We fix our cars. We try to fix ourselves. And when our children start to change, we feel the urge to fix them too. But the Buddha teaches us a different path. Before trying to change anything, come home to yourself first. Healing doesn't begin with fixing your child. It begins with the awareness of the parent. Children don't need eloquent lessons to feel love. They feel it through your energy. You can say the most gentle things, but if inside you are anxious, angry, or disappointed, your child will feel it. They may not have the words for it, but their body, their spirit, they know. I remember a father who came to me. He was successful, calm, deeply devoted to his son, but his 4-year-old boy kept withdrawing, not fighting back, not shouting, just quiet, distant. The father said, "Teacher, I don't get it. I always speak positively. I never raise my voice. Why is he shutting down like this?" I looked at him and said gently, "Your son might not be listening with his ears. He's listening with his nervous system. You don't need to speak loudly for him to feel something's off. If your heart still holds unresolved fears, your son will feel it whether you say it or not." In Zen, there's a teaching. Don't blame the bitter water, examine the cup. In this case, we are the cup. Our children are the clear water. But if the cup carries bitterness, our old pain, fears, expectations we've never faced, that water absorbs it. And the child, without even knowing why, begins to retreat. I know. We're all doing our best as parents. But sometimes, good intentions without awareness become pressure. When we try too hard to make our children turn out well, we forget that maybe what they truly need is for us to become real. One of the most important doors to healing is this: energy awareness. Not what we say, not what we do, but how we show up. Are you a mother who's anxious but trying to seem calm? A father who smiles but hides quiet fear underneath? Children feel it. They don't need your perfection. They need your presence. The second door is emotional modeling. If we want our children to know how to love themselves, they need to see us doing it first. If we criticize ourselves every time we make a mistake, if we never rest, never forgive ourselves, then no matter how many times we tell our kids, "Take care of yourself," they won't believe it. I once encouraged a mother to stand in front of the mirror every morning and say out loud, "I forgive myself. I accept myself. I love myself." At first, she felt silly. But after a month, her 5-year-old daughter, who had always struggled with self-worth, began standing beside her, quietly whispering the same words. Not because anyone told her to, but because she saw her mother not just living for others, but finally coming home to herself. And then comes the third door: letting go of expectations. You see, the hardest part of parenting isn't sacrifice. It's surrender. Surrendering the belief that our child must be this or that. Surrendering the idea that we have failed if they don't succeed in the way we imagined. Letting go of the perfect child image we hold, while our child is just trying to survive as their true self. In one of my meditation workshops for parents, a father cried as he shared, "Teacher, I pushed my son for 20 years to become a doctor, but all he ever wanted was to be a chef." I argued, I scolded until he finally left home. Now I realize maybe all he ever needed was for me to look at him without expectation. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means being present without trying to control. Like the Buddha taught, one who lets go of the self sees clearly into the heart. Letting go isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of a deeper, freer, more mindful love. Healing doesn't ask you to become a perfect parent. It asks you to become yourself. With a heart that listens, with a mind that slows down, with a willingness to admit, I'm still learning. Children don't need flawless parents. They need honest ones. Ones who cry, who apologize, who grow, who sit down and say, I don't know everything, but I'm here, and I'm learning to love you better. If you've stayed with me until this point, I believe a seed of awareness is blooming inside you. Don't rush to fix your child. Instead, come back and relight the lantern in your own heart. Because your light is the very light your child may be searching for to find their way home. There's a question I often receive from parents, especially when their children begin to fall behind in school, in behavior, or in society's standards. The question usually comes with worry in their eyes and weight in their voices. Why isn't my child like other kids? And I usually respond with a gentle question of my own. Who decided that being like everyone else is the right way to be? We grow up in a culture obsessed with measuring grades, awards, competition, achievements. But there's something that schools, report cards, and honors lists can't measure: the true direction of a child's soul. Not every child is born to excel at math, or writing, or leadership. Some children are born to quietly observe the world. Some are here to write poetry, to plant trees, to listen deeply. I remember once, during a parent meeting, a father came to me, tears in his eyes. He said, "Teacher, my son is failing everything. I've hired tutors, I've scolded him, I've encouraged him, but his grades remain poor. He's not making progress at all." I didn't rush to comfort him. Instead, I simply asked, "When have you seen your son truly light up?" He paused, thinking, then softly said, "When he's playing with Legos, when he spends hours putting together the tiniest pieces, when he fixes a broken lamp for his mother." I smiled and said, "Maybe your son wasn't born to solve equations, but to build bridges." What society calls failure might in fact be the exact doorway through which your child is being gently guided back to their deepest nature, shaped over many lifetimes. In Buddhism, we call this tan ngirp, the natural inclination of consciousness carried from previous lives. Not every child is here to follow the same rhythm. Some carry the fire of creation. Some carry the stillness of healing. Some don't speak much, but their eyes can dissolve pain. If we only see children through society's narrow frame of success, we'll miss the sacred beauty that their karma has brought into this world. The Buddha once taught, "Do not bend the tree to fit your wish. Care for the soil, the light, the water, and the tree will grow in its own nature." We don't need to turn a lotus into a rose. We just need to water it right, place it where it belongs, and give it time. A child who loves to color is not avoiding learning. They're learning in their way. A child who daydreams is not useless. They're diving into a depth we, as adults, have long forgotten. I remember a Buddhist student in his 62nd once told me during tea meditation, "Teacher, when I was little, I loved to draw, but as soon as my father heard, he said, 'You won't survive in this world with drawings.' So I gave up my brush. And for 40 years, I never painted again." Now I realize I've never truly lived a single day as myself. His words brought a tightness to my chest. Not because the story was rare, but because it's so common. How many children have abandoned their true selves just to squeeze into the tight suit of smart, obedient, or successful? How many parents love their children, but love them through conditions, never realizing that loving their essence is the only kind of love that truly heals? As a monk who's met hundreds of families, I can tell you this honestly. Sometimes what we call a lack of motivation in a child isn't about laziness or failure. It's about disconnection. When a child is not seen with eyes free of judgment, they slowly begin to believe they're unworthy. And when they aren't touched by unconditional love, they start to build walls. Some grow rebellious, some go silent. But when we begin to ask different questions, not "Why aren't you trying harder?" but "When do you feel most alive?" that connection begins to return. Sometimes that shift is as simple as an afternoon building a birdhouse together, planting a single herb, or quietly listening as they tell a story that seems to go nowhere. That's not a parenting mistake. That's a sacred correction, a return to the heart. And if you're hearing these words now, with even a slight lump in your throat, perhaps you're already beginning that journey. Don't be afraid if your child is different. Be grateful, because sometimes their difference is the doorway you and your child will walk through to find the most authentic version of yourselves together. Some children don't yell. They don't slam doors. They don't argue. They just go quiet. And often, it's that silence that troubles parents the most. Not because their child talks back, but because they've stopped talking altogether. Not because they ran away, but because they've slowly withdrawn, bit by bit, from the very home they live in. I once sat in meditation beside a mother in her 50s. The hollows beneath her eyes told of many sleepless nights. She said to me, "Teacher, my daughter hasn't done anything wrong. She still goes to school, still eats dinner with me, still answers when I ask something. But her eyes, they're no longer the same. It's like she's here, but not really." I paused for a long moment before replying. "It's possible your daughter is carrying a pain she doesn't even know how to name, and she's trying to survive it by shrinking inward." So often, we assume rebellion looks like defiance, loud voices, eye rolls, slamming doors. But not every child fights with sound. Some choose silence. Not because they hate their parents, not because they want to challenge authority, but because they no longer feel safe enough to open up. The Buddha once said, "The mind is like water. When still, it is clear. When disturbed, it becomes cloudy." And children are the most delicate streams of all. Children don't just listen with their ears. They feel with their whole nervous system. They pick up on the exhaustion we try to hide, the anger we haven't yet healed, the pressure we never speak aloud, but that seeps into our sighs, our footsteps, the way we knock just a little too hard on their door. Children absorb it all, not with reasoning, but with open hearts and minds that haven't yet grown their defenses. So when they soak up too much stress, too much expectation, too much disconnection, and have nowhere to release it, they retreat, because retreating is their way of surviving. I once heard a psychologist say something that stayed with me. Silent children don't stay quiet because they have nothing to say. They stay quiet because they're not sure it's safe to say it. And the heartbreaking part? That silence is often misunderstood. Parents see their child becoming quiet and label it as laziness, sadness, or being off. So they try to fix it with words, "If something's wrong, you need to tell me." You can't act like this. You've got to be strong. These words, no matter how well-meaning, can push the child even deeper into their shell. Some children, they were once chatty and full of sparkle. But as they grew, they spoke less. Not because they were being disrespectful, but because they lost the safe space where their heart once felt held. In those moments, what they need isn't advice. It isn't lectures. It isn't even solutions. What they need is presence. Quiet, unjudging, non-demanding presence. I once encouraged a father to simply sit beside his son every night for 5 minutes. No talking, no instructing, just breathe together. At first, the boy sat stiffly, like he'd been forced. But by the 3rd week, he was the one placing the chair down, sitting beside his father, in silence. Nothing had to be said. The peace of simply being there, like a steady, rooted tree, was enough. Presence, infused with stillness, is a healing balm for children who are screaming through their silence. There's a Zen phrase I hold close to my heart. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of being pushed around by the mind. A silent child may not be speaking, but inside, there's often a storm. They don't know how to express it. They don't know where the safe harbor island. But sometimes, just one mindful adult, calm and conscious, is enough to help them believe in the world again. So to you, dear parents, grandparents, caregivers, I want to say this. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be there, with an open heart and a peaceful energy. Your child doesn't need you to explain everything. They need you to be a refuge, a place where they are not judged, a person who breathes slowly when the world feels overwhelming, someone who stays seated when they can't find the words, someone who doesn't walk away even when they're being distant or cold. This is not a theory. It's a living spiritual practice. If you've noticed your child change, from lighthearted to quiet, from playful to withdrawn, please don't rush to fix them. First, take a look within. Clear your emotional space. When you're at peace, they'll feel it. When you listen to yourself, they'll begin to exhale. And maybe, just maybe, on some ordinary day, while you're washing dishes, locking your bike, or reading a book, they'll come sit beside you, softly, and whisper, "Mom, I've got something I want to say." There's something I've come to realize after many years of working with families trying to reconnect. You don't have to say much for a child to feel the shift. When an adult begins to change, the energy in the home changes. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly sensed tension or peace, even if no one said a word? That's not superstition. That's biology. That's psychology. The human nervous system is constantly reacting to the energy around it. And children, with their raw sensitivity, feel that more strongly than we do. They don't need us to preach wisdom. They just need to see us live it. I once worked with a mother in her early 42nd. She was deeply worried about her 2-year-old son. He was often irritable, withdrawn, and quick to shut others out. She told me through teary eyes, "I love him so much, but he snaps at me, slams the door, doesn't want anyone near." I asked her gently, "When you feel sad, do you give yourself space to breathe? Does anyone hold you?" She paused for a long moment, and then broke down in tears. That's when I knew the boy wasn't the only one hurting. So we didn't begin by fixing the child. We began with the mother. She started practicing meditation, She gave attention to her sleep. She kept a gratitude journal. She took 5 quiet minutes each evening to sit beside her son, saying nothing. And something simple, but profound, happened. Her son started smiling again. Not because she had discovered the perfect parenting strategy, but because she had come home to herself. And from that calmness, the energy in their home began to soften. In Zen, we often say, when the mud settles, the water clears. It's the same with a parent's heart. When we let our pain, our fatigue, our tension settle through mindfulness, our children feel it, without a word. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful phrase, when the mind is peaceful, the energy is harmonious. That means when you're truly at peace inside, healing flows from your voice, your eyes, your footsteps. I remember a moment at the temple. A little boy, maybe 10, had followed his mother to a chanting session. He didn't say much, just sat quietly, looking around. But at the end, he turned to his mother and whispered, "Mom, you feel different today. You're calmer." I was standing nearby, and I smiled. It wasn't because she had chanted louder than usual. It was because her mind was quieter. Children don't detect peace with logic. They feel it with their hearts. And this is what they need most. Not a perfect mom. Not a dad who gets everything right. But an adult who is willing to slow down, to listen inwardly, to breathe deeply and honestly. I once told a group of parents, there is no greater gift you can give your child than your gentle, non-judging presence. A compassionate hug when your child messes up. A quiet gaze when they don't know how to express emotion. A mindful breath when you feel the urge to shout. These are wordless messages, and yet they speak loudest to a child's soul. Someone once asked me, "Teacher, I've been through so much pain in my past. I'm afraid I'm too broken to raise my child well." And I answered, gently but firmly, it's because you've known pain, that you now have the chance to stop the cycle. And when you begin to heal, your child no longer has to carry that same wound. Modern neuroscience calls this co-regulation, the process where a child's nervous system mirrors that of their caregiver. So when you breathe deeply, when you stay grounded, your child naturally adjusts to that rhythm. You don't need to lecture. You just need to be there, like a still lake, so your child can see their own reflection. And if today you're carrying unfinished stories, regrets, unspoken words, lingering wounds, please don't try to fix it all at once with action. Begin simply, with one deep breath, one mindful step, one quiet whisper to your own heart. I'm learning too. I'm not perfect, but I'm here. And maybe one day, when you least expect it, while you're folding laundry or parking the car, your child will turn to you and say, "Dad, the house feels warmer today." Not because the temperature changed, but because you came home to yourself. And that's what opened the door for them to come home too. There's something so subtle, so small, yet it shapes the course of a child's entire life. It's this: how a parent treats themselves. We often think children need more guidance, more lectures, but the truth is, they learn by watching. They observe every sigh, every frown, and every word you say to yourself. When you spill a glass of water and mutter, "Ugh, I'm so clumsy." When you glance in the mirror and whisper, "I look terrible today." When you forget something and say out loud, "I'm so stupid." You think your child isn't paying attention, but they hear, they see, and slowly they begin to mirror. I once met a 4-year-old girl, bright, artistic, full of potential, yet she could never say anything kind about herself. She wore oversized clothes to hide her body. She avoided eye contact. She often made others laugh by making fun of herself first. No one else was criticizing her, but she had already learned how to criticize herself from the person closest to her, her mother. Her mom was a responsible, loving woman, but every single day she spoke to herself with harshness. In the mirror, "I've really let myself go." When she forgot something, "I'm so useless." When someone gave her a compliment, "You're too kind, I'm nothing special." And her daughter, without being told, absorbed every bit of it. You see, self-love doesn't grow from lectures. It grows in the emotional climate of the home, and that climate is shaped by how parents speak to themselves. I remember a devoted Buddhist practitioner, a single mother who was extremely hard on herself. During a tea meditation at the temple, I said to her, "If you want your daughter to love herself, you have to show her what that looks like. Not in words, but in how you live." That day, she made a quiet vow. Every morning, after brushing her teeth, she stood in front of the mirror, placed her hand on her chest, and gently said, "I forgive myself. I accept myself. I love myself." At first, it felt awkward, almost silly, but she stayed with it every single day. Not out of superstition, not as a robotic routine, but because she knew she was planting a new seed. On the 40th day, as her daughter waited outside the bathroom like usual, she heard something new, a tiny echo, barely a whisper. "I love myself." No one told the girl to say it. No one taught her those words. The energy had simply shifted, and she felt it. The Buddha once said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your own love and affection." So if you want your child to believe in themselves, to live with courage, to walk confidently in their truth, you must start by treating yourself as if you are worthy of that same love. Many of us grew up learning to be humble, to not brag, to never seem too proud. But sadly, we learned humility through the lens of self-deprecation. We were told that loving ourselves meant being selfish. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us this: true compassion doesn't begin with others. It begins in your own heart. If you constantly beat yourself up, you're teaching your child, self-love is wrong. You have to suffer to be worthy. You have to be better, prettier, more perfect to deserve love. But if you can sit quietly, place a hand on your heart after making a mistake, and whisper, "I'm still worthy," your child, whether they say it aloud or not, will feel something powerful. I don't have to be perfect to be loved. You see, self-love isn't a slogan. It's the atmosphere we live in. You can hang 100 inspirational quotes on the wall, but they won't mean as much as the moment your child sees you. Hug yourself after a hard day. And if you never had anyone teach you this growing up, that's okay. Now is your moment. Now is your chance to begin again. Not just for yourself, but so your child doesn't have to repeat the same patterns. Let your child see you. Smile when you mess up. Rest when you're tired. Speak gently to yourself, the way you once wished someone had spoken to you. You don't need to teach them to love themselves. Just show them what self-love looks like in the middle of real life. And sometimes it starts as simply as this: a nod in the mirror, a deep breath that doesn't come with shame, and a quiet promise whispered into the soul. I'm still learning how to love myself, and it's okay if you learn with me. I still remember the eyes of an elderly father, he must have been over 60, when he leaned in and quietly said to me after a Dharma talk, "Venerable, I used to think I raised my son well, but lately, it feels like he's living someone else's life." I gently asked him, "And who decided what kind of life your son should live?" He lowered his gaze and whispered, "I did." That conversation is not rare. In truth, I've met many parents deeply loving, well-intentioned, but loving their children through a blueprint they designed, not through present moment listening. Maybe that's why the Buddha never referred to anyone as my child or your parent in possessive terms. He simply called us sentient beings, each with our own karma, each walking a path that belongs to no one else. And if we truly listen to that teaching, we'll begin to understand. Our children are not extensions of us. They're not replicas, not backups, not vessels to fulfill our unfulfilled dreams. They are independent souls, walking a path we ourselves have never walked. I once met a highly accomplished mother, a doctor who graduated from a prestigious university. She came to see me in distress. Her 6-year-old son had just told her he wanted to take a year off from school to find himself. She was panicked, worried. She told me, "Venerable, I've sacrificed my whole life to give him everything I didn't have. He has all the tools and now he just wants to pause?" I looked at her and said softly, "Perhaps your son is about to begin the journey. You were never allowed to start." You see, as parents, we often believe we are leading the way. But many times, our children don't need a leader. They need a companion. Because there are parts of their path we simply cannot walk for them. We cannot choose who they love. We cannot fall or rise in their place. We cannot discover who they are for them. What we can do is walk beside them with awareness, without ego. In Buddhism, there is a term, Tathagata, the thus come one. It means one who arrives just as they are. Each being comes into this world with an essence that cannot be copied or molded. And if we understand that, we'll stop trying to shape our children into what we think is right. Because the moment we drop the urge to fix, we begin to see their Buddha nature. It's like a skilled woodworker. They never carve the wood according to a mold. They observe the grain, the knots, the natural curves. They respect its form. Parenting is the same, not about carving the child, but understanding them. I once taught meditation to a group of parents. One question stayed with me. "Venerable, my child is so different from me. Sometimes I feel like I don't understand them at all." I smiled and replied, "That's not a failure, it's a beginning. Because only when you let go of what you think you know, can you truly meet your child." Parenthood isn't a race to produce a perfect human being. It's a path of personal transformation, to become more present, less controlling, and more deeply listening every day. A father once told me, "When my son was younger, he talked so much, asking questions nonstop. I used to scold him for being too chatty. Now that he's grown, he doesn't ask anything, and I feel empty." I looked at him and said gently, "Maybe your son's voice is still there. He just doesn't feel allowed to use it anymore." When we let go of the ideal image of our child, we begin to see what we've never dared to face. Their real fears, their real dreams, and the parts of themselves they've hidden just to make us proud. If you're a parent feeling exhausted, unsure of what your child truly wants, I invite you to let go of one small thing. Let go of the need to know. Instead, sit down with your child, like two travelers, learning side by side. You don't have to know everything. You just have to be fully present and trust that like a seed, your child will blossom in the direction they were born to grow, as long as the environment around them is filled with light and not warped by our expectations. Let your child become who they are, not who you wish them to be. Because when they're finally free to be themselves, you too will be free to finally be you. And from there, a new kind of connection can begin, deeper, more honest, and rooted in freedom. Love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go gently. There was a time when I believed that deep love would make a child stay. But the longer I live and the more parents I meet across generations, the more I've come to realize the deeper the love, the more we must learn to let go gently. I once spoke with a mother, her eyes still red after a temple ceremony. She quietly confided, "Venerable, I love my son so much. I always want to text him, call him, know what he's eating, if he's sleeping well. But the more I try to love him, the more distant he becomes. He says, I'm suffocating him, but I'm not doing anything wrong, am I? I'm just loving him." I looked at her and said softly, "You're not wrong for loving him, but love without mindfulness becomes attachment. And even the kindest attachment can feel like a cage." Some parents believe love means always being present, always checking in, always intervening. But deep love doesn't always show up as constant presence. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your child is space. In Buddhism, the Buddha once taught, when you love someone, do not cling. For even if you cling, you cannot truly hold them. When you see someone suffer, do not try to fix it for them. For even if you fix it, it will not last. Only love that is free from attachment can nurture true freedom. And it's true. Real love doesn't try to possess. It doesn't draw maps. It doesn't demand someone follow a path of our choosing. Real love stands beside someone and blesses what we cannot control. I once knew an elderly father whose daughter was studying abroad. He loved her deeply, but had learned the art of letting go. Each night, instead of calling to remind her to eat or sleep, he would simply sit in silent meditation for 10 minutes and send her a blessing from his heart. May you walk in peace. May you grow in light. No pressure, no control, just quiet presence offered with deep sincerity. And his daughter didn't grow distant. In fact, whenever she called, her voice was warm. "Dad, it's strange. It feels like you're always with me, but never weighing me down." You see, letting go doesn't make love disappear. It just makes love cleaner, brighter, and free from fear. Because sometimes, what wears our children out isn't the lack of love, but the weight of that love when it's wrapped in expectations, anxieties, or conditions. Every message that says, "I love you," also quietly carries the subtext, "Be this, don't do that." And slowly, the child begins to shrink. Even modern psychology shows children don't just need love. They need space to explore, to fail, and to rise on their own. Overloving when not practiced mindfully can make children afraid to try, for fear of disappointing the parent, afraid they're not good enough, afraid of breaking the image of the perfect child that was built around them. So the deeper the love, the more we must ask ourselves, am I loving my child, or am I trying to keep them inside the image I want? I often describe mindful love like this. It's like a river flowing through a field, nourishing but never clinging, not like a dam forcing water to flow in a direction it was never meant to go. Because any stream blocked too long will eventually break free. And that's why the more we love, the more we must learn the art of standing nearby without holding tight, the art of blessing in silence, the art of loving without binding. Maybe your child is going through a rebellious phase or choosing a path you don't understand. Maybe they're silent, distant, or doing things you can't relate to. But if you can loosen your grip on who you think they should be, and instead see them as a fellow soul on their own spiritual journey, something extraordinary will happen. Love will begin to reach deeper, and your child will begin to return. Not because they have to, but because they feel safe to. And if today, as you hear these words, something inside you begins to soften, then please hold on to this. Big love is not about holding tighter. It's about knowing when to let go. Flowers don't bloom because you tug on them. They bloom because you cared for them patiently, without force. Children don't grow because you control them. They grow because you believe in them. The good child might be the loneliest one. There's a paradox I often witness when working with families. The most obedient, well-behaved, high-achieving children are sometimes the loneliest. They're always on time. They do their homework. They speak politely. They keep their room tidy. From the outside, you might think, that child is perfect. What lucky parents! But when you sit close enough to them, their eyes don't sparkle. They know how to do what's right, but they don't know how to feel. I once spoke with a 17-year-old boy, top of his class. Teachers adored him. He came to the temple during an internship, polite, mature, articulate. But when it was just the two of us, sitting quietly on the porch of the temple, he sighed and whispered, "Venerable, I don't know why. I do everything right, but inside, I feel so empty." I went quiet, because I knew he wasn't alone in that feeling. Some children, from a very young age, learn to meet expectations instead of connecting with their emotions. And it's not because their parents don't love them. It's because that love is often wrapped in performance, pressure, and perfection. Parents are busy, so they love through preparation. Healthy meals, tutoring schedules, structured plans. But rarely do they pause to ask, "How are you feeling?" And then truly listen. We live in a world that praises results. From the time a child is small, people ask, "What school do you go to? What's your GPA? Are you top of your class?" But how often do we ask, "Are you happy? Do you know who you are? Do you feel loved even when you're not doing anything at all?" So the child silently begins to learn, "I'm only seen when I succeed." They don't scream like rebellious teens. They don't run away. They don't slam doors. They simply shrink into the mold, and disconnect from their heart. In Buddhism, there's something just as important as keeping moral precepts, and that is cultivating compassion. Not just compassion for others, but also for yourself, for your real, messy, honest emotions. If a child grows up always needing to achieve, excel, and be good, but never learns how to love themselves in failure, then later in life, when pain hits, they won't know how to stay with themselves. I once met a woman in her 42nd, successful by every definition. She had a great career, a respectable family, 2 well-behaved children. But when I asked her, "Who are you when you're doing nothing?" she smiled and fell silent. A few moments later, she said, "Venerable, I don't know. I only know how to do. But to feel, I think I forgot." Then she shared, "When I was little, every time I got a high grade, my mom would hug me tight. But when I didn't do well, she didn't yell. She just stayed quiet. That silence taught me, if you want to be loved, be good. She cried as she said that, because even now, she was still living under that unspoken contract. And now, her children were starting to live under it too. I want to offer this reflection. As someone who has watched many generations of children grow, achievements can't replace warmth. A perfect schedule can't replace a gentle hug. Obedience can't replace the feeling of being loved for who you truly are. So, if your child is well-behaved, tidy, never causes trouble, don't be too quick to feel at ease. Take time to look deeper, to ask yourself, is my child living with their feelings, or just living up to my expectations? Because some pain doesn't cry out. It just hides in quiet compliance and quiet emptiness. And if today something in you is awakening, please don't blame yourself. Just start with one extra question each day. How are you feeling? And maybe one extra hug, for no special reason at all. Because every child deserves to feel loved, not for being excellent, but for simply being themselves. And real love is when you keep your arms open, even when they mess up, even when they're still figuring out who they are. Because it's in that moment they begin to feel, I matter. Not because I perform, but because someone sees me. Loving our children the way we were taught, or the way they truly need. I once asked a middle-aged father, how do you show love to your child? Without hesitation, he replied, I work hard so my child has a good life. I teach him manners, teach him responsibility. Every time he does something right, I praise him. When he makes a mistake, I correct it immediately. Isn't that what a good parent does, Venerable? I looked at him for a moment and gently said, you're not wrong, but maybe it's not quite enough. I didn't say that to criticize. I said it to open a door for all of us, as parents who are loving our children in the way we were once loved. You see, most of us don't learn how to love from books. We learn from how love was modeled for us. If your parents were quiet, you may have learned, love doesn't need to be spoken. If your mother was always anxious and controlling, you may have believed, to love means to intervene. If you were only hugged when you did well, you may now, without realizing it, be teaching your child. You have to succeed to be close. And none of that makes you a bad parent. It just means you're part of a long emotional lineage, a river of inherited love patterns passed down through generations. But sometimes, that river flows through you so it can be healed. I once met a woman in her 52nd. She told me she loved her son deeply, but the more she loved, the more distant he became. She said, I take care of everything. His meals, his sleep, his needs. I never push him to be top of the class. But whenever he opens up about his feelings, I get uncomfortable because my parents never let me complain. I had to be strong my whole life. I thought raising a child meant being firm. Why is he so sensitive? I sat quietly for a moment, then asked, if you once longed for someone to truly listen to you, could it be that your son is now longing for the same thing from you? She froze, and then she cried, not because she was angry at her son, but because she realized she had been loving him in the way she had once needed, but never received. We love our children with all our hearts, but if that love simply repeats what we were taught, without pausing to ask what our children actually need, they may grow up to be just like us, with a quiet emptiness inside. The Buddha once taught, to truly love, you must first understand. Without understanding, love easily becomes pressure. And understanding doesn't mean knowing everything. It means having the courage to pause and ask, Am I loving my child from an old place of fear? Am I teaching them the way I was once forced to learn? Am I pushing them to succeed because I never got to chase my own dreams? These questions aren't easy, but if we're willing to look deeply, that becomes the beginning of something powerful, a new way to love, not through more material gifts, not through better advice, but through presence, through stillness, through sincerity. I often compare this process to tending a garden that was once planted with the wrong seeds. You don't need to burn it all down. You just need to quietly enrich the soil, trim the roots, water gently in the right season, and trust that new flowers will bloom. I once witnessed a mother, after years of working non-stop and worrying endlessly, decide to write a handwritten letter to her 20-year-old daughter. She wrote, "I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like I only cared about the outcome. When I was young, no one ever held me when I was sad, so I never learned how to hold you at the right time. But now, I'm learning, and I want to love you, not the way I was lacking, but the way you need." Her daughter read the letter in silence, and then ran to her mother and embraced her. No blame, no anger, just two hearts, finally meeting without the roles, without the expectations. You see, when we begin to reflect on how we love, we don't become perfect parents. We simply become more human, real enough to love more completely. And if today you realize, maybe I've been loving my child through old patterns instead of truly listening, please don't blame yourself, because that very awareness means you've arrived at the doorway of awakening. And the deepest love often begins not with perfection, but with the quiet courage to pause and choose to love again differently. Is it too late to love my child differently? There's one question I hear most often from older parents during my talks. Venerable, is it too late? Too late to say sorry? Too late to make up for lost time? Too late to bridge a distance that has become habitual? Too late to rebuild love with the child who's now grown or gone or no longer willing to sit down and talk? And each time, I look them in the eye and say slowly, clearly, number, it's never too late as long as your heart still wants to love for real. You see, in Buddhist teachings, karma is not a life sentence. Karma is a pattern, a tendency, a repeated response shaped over time. And the beautiful truth is this: the moment we bring mindfulness into the pattern, it can begin to shift. It doesn't require us to rewind time. It only invites us to begin right now, with one sincere gesture, one honest word, one moment of presence without rushing, without lecturing, without demanding. I remember a man in his 72nd who came to see me. He said, "My son is 40 now. He's successful, has his own family, but he never talks to me like he did when he was young. I know. It's partly because I was too strict back then. I only knew how to teach. I didn't know how to listen." Then he asked me quietly, "Does that mean my son doesn't need me anymore, Venerable?" I smiled gently, placed my hand on his shoulder, and said, "It's not that he doesn't need you. He just doesn't know if it's safe to open his heart again. And your role now isn't to explain the past. It's to create a space quiet enough, safe enough, for his heart to return." So the man began writing letters, not to justify anything, just to say that he was learning how to love again. And if his son was ever ready, he'd like to hear his side of the story. No pressure, no rush, just a gentle invitation. A few weeks later, he told me, for the first time in almost 15 years, the two of them sat down for a meal. No longer pretending. No longer wearing roles. That's what true love can do. When it's sincere enough, quiet enough, humble enough, it doesn't need the past to be rewritten. It only needs the present to be real. There's a teaching in Buddhism called present moment dwelling in joy, which means finding peace in the joy of this very moment. No, we can't fix the past, but we can make now warm enough so that if our child ever returns, they won't have to feel the cold again. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with a big act. It begins with a silent question whispered to your own heart. What is still unsaid between me and my child? And then you just sit with it. Don't rush to fix. Don't run to explain. Just sit like sitting beside a seed underground. It hasn't sprouted yet, but something inside is beginning to stir. If your child is already grown, if you've made mistakes, if the silence feels so thick you don't know where to start, then start with presence. A blessing with no condition. A gaze without judgment. A companionship that doesn't demand anything in return. And maybe, if it feels right, say this: I don't want to teach you anymore. I just want to learn how to be beside you. Then let it be. No need to expect. No need to be answered. Just say it from a place of truth. And if your child doesn't respond, that's okay. Because the miracle of mindful love is this: it doesn't need a reply to keep flowing. You may never know if that letter reached their heart, but you will know this: by turning inward with awareness, you have stopped the karmic cycle right here, right now. Because sometimes, just one awakened person in a family can give an entire generation the rest it never had. And if you're still here, listening to these final moments of this video, I believe somewhere inside you, there is still a garden waiting to be watered. So go toward that place. No need to hurry. No need to make up for the past. Just bring your presence gentle, deep, and real. And from that place, whether you are 40, 60, or 80 years old, you can still begin a new kind of love with your child and with yourself. If you're still here, still listening at the very end of this journey, then I truly believe there's something beautiful stirring in your heart. A part of you that longs to understand more, to love more deeply, and to begin again with mindfulness. Maybe you were once a strict father. Maybe you were a mother who always worried. Maybe no one ever taught you how to express love, and so you simply didn't know how. But today, you're here, and that is the first step toward a new beginning. If something in this video touched your heart, I invite you to share something in the comments below. A memory, a moment of awakening, something you wish you had heard from your parents, or maybe something you've always wanted to say to your child, but never found the words for. Because who knows? Your story might become the light that guides someone else who's also learning how to love again. And if this message meant something to you, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next reflection. Here at Buddhism Seeds, we're not here to tell you who to become. We're simply here to invite you back to yourself. From that place, real love can grow, steady, rooted, and no longer repeating the same old wounds. I hope to see you in the next video, where one awakened heart might help another find its peace. Until then, may you be well, may you be safe, and may you be held in the quiet strength of love